Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome to the second week of our evening series with Sheikh Abu Sumayya, hosted by the Mehdi Society. In this series, we're exploring the Malaise of Modernity by Charles Taylor, a thought-provoking look at how modern life shapes our identity and values, and how Islam offers timeless guidance in navigating these challenges. Tonight's topic, What Does a Rich Muslim Family Look Like?, encourages us to reflect on the true meaning of wealth and success through an Islamic lens. We'll begin with a dars, followed by a Q&A session, and then gather for Maghrib Jamaat prayers. This series continues on Friday, May 16th and Friday, May 30th, inshallah. We hope to see you again. If you'd like to sponsor a session in dedication to your marhumin, sponsorships are available for $250. Please speak to a team member for details. Jazakallah, may Allah bless this gathering and increase us in knowledge and insight. Whenever you're ready, Bismillah.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد ولعنة الله دائمة على أعدائهم أجمعين من يومنا هذا إلى قيام يوم الدين. Oh, glad to see some people could make it, even though there's a game. But you can, I mean, it's like 3 hours long or something, right? So you can probably log on as soon as this is done. So the question that I posed for today's subtopic is a little bit intentionally provocative, which is, what does a rich Muslim family look like? And the reason I chose that topic is because we're following this book called The Malaise of Modernity by Charles Taylor, where basically Charles Taylor in the 90s laid out what he thought was some of the unique aspects of modern life and what that modern life looks like and the effects that it has on the wider society. And through that, the development of technology and so on and so forth, and how people look at themselves, understand themselves in a very uniquely different way that separates them from the past. It separates them from the people, from people of another age. And in this book, he addresses a whole host of issues. And I noticed from last week, not too many people were so interested in the book itself, so I'm not going to go through the book. It's not a book. This is not a book club. I mean, I would have loved if there was that aptitude, but or interest, rather, but there isn't so much. So I'm just doing ishara to the book. I'm not going to go through it with you. But there's a quotation in there, and you'll see how it relates to the title I've chosen for today's discussion, which is Communal Love and Wilaya, Parents, Educators, and Children. Because the question is, what does a rich family look like, right? And most of the brothers here or the sisters attending are either married or of marriageable age. So this is a very, very important subject to choose, right? Or they're, at some point should think about this as they, are in their teens and or at least through the age of becoming mukallafa. So there's two slides there. Can you go to the next one, please? Sorry, I'm so used to it being very automatic. Other centers, they have this, I've seen this thing that clicks. It's got this like radio receptor or something. Maybe you should. Anyways, that's a side thing. Anyhow, so yeah. So on the screen there, you see there's two excerpts from the Malaise of Modernity, page 16 and page 17, in which he mentions a couple of things which I want to kind of set the scene for our discussion here, right? As you can see, I highlighted one in blue and one in green, right? Where he talks about the connection between this idea of self-indulgence, right? So he talks about this concept of self-indulgence. You're going to see exactly where we're going with this in a moment, okay? Self-indulgence. Meaning to feed your appetite, right? Simply put, self-indulgence. And he says that the self-indulgence is particularly linked to a kind of, or it can be perceived as a kind of narcissism, right? Narcissism, I think? I don't know. Narcissism. I think it's SCI. But anyhow, yeah, it is. Anyway, so it's linked to a kind of narcissism, which is care only for yourself, right? So there's something unique about this age, right? This concept of self-care, right? It's constantly emphasized, this concept of self-care. Take care of yourself first before you take care of others. Put on your seatbelt before putting on the seatbelt for others. Again, I'm not saying there's something wrong with that. We're just kind of looking at it from a broader point of view. And he says that through that came very much this idea, this is where he's going, which becoming busy with your own career. So there's the idea that being busy with your own career is a kind of good form of narcissism. It's a good form of self-indulgence in the modern age. This idea of a career being very much linked to who you are. This is what makes modern people very unique. Because people at an earlier time, their career was one aspect of their life. But today, he says, what the unique thing of modernity, by dislocating oneself from divine values, they enter this kind of narcissistic stage. And he says that, I have no doubt that this describes some, perhaps lots of people, but it is a big mistake to think that it allows us insight into the change in our culture, into the power of this moral ideal, which we need to understand, and if we are to explain even why it is used as a hypocritical patina by the self-indulgent. Basically what he's saying is, there's this idea, and the interesting thing is that most families that I counsel, and I've counseled hundreds, thousands of families over the years, or thousands of people, not thousands of families, meaning the number of people I must have met in over 15 years of travel and meeting people and all over the world. And nobody really steps back to think. Every time I counsel a couple or I sit down and counsel somebody or I'm looking at some kind of family dispute or whatever it is, nobody really steps back to ask themselves, what gives them self-fulfillment. That often we find the core area of separation in the family is husband and wife, or even father and daughter, or father and son. They get fulfillment from things that are different from one another, right? So one is on one road, one is on another road, and sometimes those roads meet, but when they go in different directions, they very much are separate from each other. Why? And then I'm told, well, I'm busy in my career. I matter. Right? This whole mantra of my career, my way, my ambitions. And Taylor says this is something that is profoundly unique, and it can't be explained simply as a kind of egotistical nature. It's not. Because people genuinely believe that this is their purpose in life. He says you cannot simply tell someone that they're egotistical, that they're arrogant, that they're jahil, that they're an idol worshiper. No, because they genuinely believe that this is what gives them fulfillment. They genuinely believe that this is what gives them that sense of purpose. And then if you look at the next paragraph up there, it's very important. Read along here. He says, what we need to explain is what is peculiar to our time, right? So what is unique to our time? What is unique, right, in the green? It is not just that people sacrifice their love relationships and the care of their children to pursue their careers. That's always happened. People have sacrificed their marriages and sacrificed their children and sacrificed their loved ones and sacrificed their parents and sacrificed this, and that in the name of their career before. This is not unique. What is unique about today? This is Charles Taylor, the Canadian Catholic philosopher, saying this, right? Harvard professor. He says, something like this has perhaps always existed. The point is that today many people feel that they are called to do this. They feel they ought to do this. They feel their lives would be somehow wasted or unfulfilled if they didn't do it. So they feel that this obsession with self-fulfillment through pursuing some kind of solely dedicated material goal is the goal of their life. And everything else can and should be sacrificed for it. And should be sacrificed for it. And imagine entering into a marriage where this is the case. We have a very big problem now. A very big problem. This is a ginormous problem. Because this has nothing to do with the principles of divine reality. It has everything to do with something that is unique to this age. And it has nothing to do with the verse that is on the screen there, which is الْمُؤْمِنُونَ وَالْمُؤْمِنَاتِ بَعْضُهُمْ أَوْلِيَاءُ بَعْضٍ. The believing men and the believing women are awliya to one another. Right? They're awliya to each other. They're very dear friends to one another. They're intimate companions to one another. Why? يَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَيَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ. Why? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, because they advise what is good and refrain each other from evil. يَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ. Not because they're going to be partner at the firm. I'm not saying that that personal ambition is not important. Oh yeah, the next slide. Sorry. What I'm simply saying is that doesn't give richness to life. So there are two kinds, right? There's the first person, and trust me, I know. In fact, I have. Oh, this is being recorded. I have to be very careful what I say. See, I gotta be so censored now, right? Because everything's online now. I gotta be, kind of can't really talk openly. But there are people out there that are so busy in their life, I actually know of this, that they have to have a personal family manager. Yeah, I know people like that. So they have a manager that manages the husband's schedule, the wife's schedule, and the children's schedule, and then plots in. And it might even actually make sense in some sense, but my point is that everyone is so driven in different ways. The kids are in sports camps, this camp, that camp. You know, they're off making deals, wheeling and dealing in the millions and tens of millions. And then they, plot out these kind of times through the year where they think, we can all our schedules match up. Everyone from the 8-year-old to the 18-year-old to the 25-year-old to the 55-year-old, everyone's schedule kind of matches up because everyone is somehow looped into this narcissism. And none of it, if you stop and you ask, how much of this has a goal that goes beyond this world? At what point can one stop and say that this verse that I have on the screen, that we're embodying this verse, that how much of it is a means and how much of it is an end? See, what happens is that we fool ourselves very often to thinking that these things are an end in and of themselves, but they're but a means. Right? We say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives me this opportunity so that I can يَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَيَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ. So that I can يُقِيمُونَ الصَّلَاةَ وَيُؤْتُونَ الزَّكَاةَ. So that I can يُطِيعُونَ اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ. So that they can command good, refrain evil. So that they can maintain prayer and give zakat. So that they can obey Allah and His Messenger. Because these are the fundamental spirituality. This is the Quranic matrix of a spiritual community. It's a matrix. And the interesting thing, what Taylor says in the Malaise of Modernity, is that ideas like this are so foreign, are so alien, are so watered down, that to even say them, one may sound like an extremist. Or when they do say them, they sound like they're speaking at a different time, at a different age. Because people find fulfillment in things that are outside of that. Or they choose to live a certain kind of life in which they're not able to implement these examples from the verse. And almost every single family that I meet, and I'm not saying people don't struggle, but I'm saying at the end of the day, when I sit and I speak to brothers and sisters that are struggling, whether it be in their marriage or whether it be in any kind of relationship that they have, whether it be with their parents, whether it be with their husband, with their wife, they don't step back to ask themselves these difficult questions. They don't. They probably don't even know of this verse. And then we ask sometimes why the Muslim community is running close to a 50% divorce rate. Yeah. That's a serious problem, right? That's a very, very serious problem, right? Oh, you got my clicker? Thank you so much. Jazakumullah alaf khair. Thank you. So, does it work? How do I press it?
You just went back one slide.
Oh, did I?
Yep.
Oh, I was looking at this screen. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah. So, oh, there we go. Okay. So, it's verses like this that I describe them as the anchor of the Muslim family. Each point here becomes an anchor for the Muslim family. So, now I'll have some discussion prompts. Speak to the person next to you and ask yourself a question. What keeps you up at night as someone wishing to have a family or is already married or already in a family? Or what are you grappling with and why? Based on what I've mentioned, did anything that I've mentioned resonate with you? Whether you are married or to be married or have siblings that are married or hear of stories or you are already or you grew up or you've grown up in a home that has struggled with these kinds of issues. Has anything I mentioned, do you think our community is grappling with any of the issues that I've mentioned on the board? Or no, we don't have any of these issues, mashallah. Everyone are mu'minin wa mu'minat, awliya ba'dahum ba'd. Huh? I don't know, tell me. This is a discussion prompt, not for me to answer to you.
So are we talking like in groups right now?
Yeah, in groups. Okay. Talk to each other. 5 minutes to the person next to you.
You're first, yeah. Me first. Remember, okay. If you're indulging yourself, that's not the thing. This is your entire lifestyle. Scenario, like on earth. He's asking you, we struggle with that. I don't think there is. I think there's well, and I think it's also a cultural thing. Whereas, for example, in Pakistan and India, it's a pretty common thing to go out with your family and say, brother. I feel like when everyone's like,
Yeah. But I feel like it's changing with it because unless you're in more of the urban, I would say, like, it depends on where you live.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of the places where you live, it's more like it takes a village to raise a kid or something.
Yeah.
But like even the newer cities and stuff,
like
everyone's on their own. Bro. It's like here, it's not even really. But I get what you're saying. It's deep rooted with these years. I don't The third one is just really that's the part of
Yeah, but that's like an extended wrong.
But I'd say the third one is something we hear like all the time. If we're ever asked for help, even if we're outspoken about like, oh, I need help with this, oh, I'm like busy with work, I can't really give my time to work or whatever.
What could also fall under, I mean, okay, it does fall under self-indulgence, right?
Yeah. What are we defining narcissism?
So let's gather back now that you had some chance to discuss. What were some of your thoughts based on what I mentioned? And remember the second quote. Let's go back to this. Tell me if any of this resonates with you here. The quote on the second page, where he talks about in the green. He says that some people in the past would sacrifice their family or their kids or whatever and say, look, no, you know what, I have to be CEO. It's really important to me. This gives me fulfillment. I need to make partner. This is something really important to me. And nobody's saying it shouldn't be important. That's the thing. Nobody's saying that we shouldn't aspire. That's not what he's saying. But he's saying that someone would sacrifice their children, meaning sacrifice their faith of their children, sacrifice their loved ones for it, not because... or rather, knowing that it's probably not the right thing to do. But today someone will do that and believe it's the right thing to do. Right? And to question otherwise. I mean, you are basically at that point violating someone's human rights. You're, maybe have social services called, right? At that point. Be considered to be maybe even a crime against humanity of some sort. Especially in these like left-leaning liberal countries, right? You get in big trouble, right? And especially if it's of the other gender, if a woman is told that, then then in that case you're probably good enough to be put in jail. So at some point, I'm being facetious, I'm joking, obviously. So, but the point is that the question that Taylor asks is why is this the case, right? And what I'm presenting here is that for Muslims, God's eternal wisdom and the guidance of Rasulullah is the spring of our existence. So thus, our goal is for our marriage, our homes, our school to reflect that vision, that way of being in the world. But the disconnect comes about where it isn't something that's deeply rooted within our hearts. And why isn't it deeply rooted in our hearts? Because we've not become habituated to it. When you're not habituated to something, it's not deeply rooted in your hearts. It really isn't deeply rooted, right? It's because you can tell the difference between families that make an effort and families that don't. I taught at Asadik for 10 years. I didn't teach, I was a director for 5, and then, working there for the other 5. So 10 years kind of cumulative, almost 9.5 years, cumulative experience there. And what did I notice between families that are struggling and families that kind of are striving or at least flourishing? The difference was the holistic environment. That there's a kind of habituation to the values of Islam, to the values of the Prophet, to the values of the Quran, to the kind of Islamic culture in the home, the Islamic culture that is there. And that Islamic culture has already been laid out here in this verse on the screen. Okay? The Islamic culture is there. The Islamic culture has already been laid out in the Quran, describing the relationship between believers, right? Now, how does this play out? Well, it plays out by each one of us have a way of being in the world. That when we ask ourselves, what is that singular principle that governs everything in our life? that principle through which we make decisions. And ultimately, as I mentioned in the first class, that goes back to whether we truly believe in God or not. Ultimately. And many, if not most of us, would be shy to admit that we perhaps have 50% kufr and 50% iman in our hearts. Because the very fact that these would be questions to be debated, as per the Quran, would put us squarely almost in the camp of spiritual kufr, of spiritual disbelief. The fact that it is even something that has to be debated. Because the believer has now gone so far into a state of ghafla, into a state of heedlessness, because they're not habituating themselves to iman. What do I mean by habituating? Habituating meaning they're not infusing themselves with that. And that's where school and community are so important. Right? That having that comportment. Let me give you another example. This is a very simple example. But all this is connected to what that family looks like, right? And I know I've given this example many times, but it's just something that I think is very important. People get married, right? So one of the ways that you can tell about somebody's ultimate values is how they conduct themselves during the milestones of their life. What are milestones in our life? What are some milestones? You tell me. What? Graduation, yeah. What's another milestone?
First job.
First job, yeah. Another milestone? What's a milestone in life? Give me an example, sister.
Like having a kid.
Having a kid, yeah, that's one. Yeah. So having kids.
Marriage.
Yeah, marriage. Marriage, yeah. Having kids, first job, graduation. Retirement, yeah, that's something else. That's a milestone. Hajj and ziyarat, right? Okay. So these are some milestones, right? Now, what do I mean by that? Remember the verse, right? Let's go back to that verse. Hold on. Before I really want us to take something home today, okay? Something really simple that we can take home. There, okay. I'll keep the English up because most of you don't necessarily Arabic speakers here. How do these, in the way we celebrate, conduct, honor, commemorate these milestones in life, how do they fit in to that verse which describes our relationships? That's the ultimate question, to see whether we are Muslim in our reality or we are kafir in reality. I'm not saying kafir in terms of becoming non-Muslim. There's sifat of kufr and sifat of muslimin. Sifat, the attributes in action, I mean. Not in becoming Muslim or non-Muslim. I'm talking about the attributes, okay? Graduation. So someone graduates, okay, you go for your convocation, all that, and the after party, they're invited to, obviously, at the university will be an alcoholic gathering, right? Full of wine and dancing and all of that. Usually they have the big parties at the university. And I'm told, well, Sheikhna, it's just one time, like I only graduate once, and you're telling me, the religion's saying we can't go to the U of T grad party or TMU or whatever. I mean, it's my graduation. Like the convocation part is finished, that's fine. But now there's a party with everyone after, and there's beer and pints and all that flying around, right? That's what happens usually at these grad parties, right? And the same thing for pharmacy, and the same thing for medicine, and the same thing for all that, right? Now, I'm not saying that this is mutlaqan haram forever. There are certain circumstances where, you're kind of thrown into a situation, you kind of, but these really are things you can choose. It's not the end of your life. This is not a darura. This is not something that is going to end your career. Your graduation is done. You finished university. You got your degree. You wore your hat. And now there's an after party. It's not going to affect your life. But many go, right? So that's a sign that Iman wasn't really there. Or if it was, it's like 50%, like I said, 50% Muslim, 50% kufr. Or 75 Muslims have 25 kufr, whatever. But it's mukhtalat. It's all mixed inside. Because that milestone in life now is celebrated with kufr and not Iman. Not faith. It's celebrated with kufr. By kufr, I mean in not disbelief, something that the deen is against, that Allah is not pleased with, that our Creator is not pleased with. Nobody's saying to not get together with friends, go out for coffee, go out for dinner, have a party at home with cake, have a celebration with your family and your friends. Fine, of course. It is an important occasion. But there are hudud that Allah has placed. There's limits that Allah has placed to that. So that's an example of a milestone that can be celebrated in a good way or in a way that is displeasing to Allah. First job, great. But is that first job at a weapons manufacturer? So let's say you've been searching for a job. 3 months, 6 months out of university, you finally get the call, and let's say it's an alcohol company. They're saying, like, look, I'm not in the plant, I'm not doing it, I'm just going to do the books. It's a huge company, Fortune 500 company, and I have the opportunity to be their in-house counsel or accountant or lawyer or whatever, right? And the excuse in the mind is, okay, you know what, I'm not serving the alcohol, I'm not making it, I'm not touching it, I'm doing the books. I'm the accountant, or I'm giving them financial advice, I'm helping them invest their funds, or whatever it is, right? It's a junior accountant, or senior, or whatever it is. What is the choice that we make at that point? Do we forego it and say, you know what, I'm going to trust in Allah here, because I'm habituated to being a follower of the Prophet, that my Muslim identity overrides that at that point? Or am I going to give in to the pressure and say, look, God, I've been waiting 3 months for a job. I'm going to jump at it. I'm going to take it. I'm not going to do Uber. I'm not going to do anything else because that's beneath me. I'm going to go for this because, look, I did my BCom. I need a job. Those choices are what I call determining, they're called life-altering choices. Because the trajectory of your life now will begin with blessings or begin with curse. These are life-altering moments. These are very important moments in our life. I'm not saying that there's no turning back, but it becomes difficult then if the start is like that. May Allah protect us, obviously, from that situation. Having kids. Again, that's probably one of the biggest challenges in life, right? Is making those decisions for our children. Especially when our children get older and they start having certain wants and certain needs. Now you have to make a decision. What's more important? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's rida or my child's disappointment? Right? How many times do I get a call, oh, my son wants to go to a mixed party where there's going to be, and they're mukallaf or mukallafa, obviously. They're not small children, they're grown-up children. And it's all mixed, boys and girls. And there's dancing. The first thing that I do is I ask my wife or I find out. I said, who is this family, first of all? Are they mutadayyin or are they multazim? Do they follow the ahkam of Islam? If my daughter is entering their home or my son is entering their home, I don't have a son, I have a daughter, but if my daughter is entering their home, what kind of home does it look like? Is there music being played? Is the food halal? Do they pay attention to, do they have ihtimam, and do they put attention to these umur, these issues? And there's nothing personal against anyone. That's my wajib. That's wajib upon me to do that. Now the result may come that there's 50-50. And they should do the same for me. How many people do that? And it may mean that the friend list goes from like 20 to 5. It may be. Now it's up to you as a parent to provide outlets for your child, to be with your child, to spend time with your child, not to farm them out, but to be their companion as well. And then obviously to find a community of people that you can habituate, that you can live in that Islamic habitat, that ecosystem, which is halal, which is pure, which is good, which is not inappropriate. Or at least is not teaching them at that age where they've just become mukallaf or mukallafa, or baligh or baligha, things that are setting them on the very wrong road in their life. Because they may be 9, they may be 10, they may be 11, but the habits and the sights and what they're seeing and what they're collecting. Again, I'm not saying you don't go to a park with your family, don't go here, don't go there. That's different. I'm not saying we're a part of the big world. Go to, on the rides. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I'm talking about with Muslimin, with Shia. There's different non-Muslims sometimes, right? You can say, look, we're at the park, we're going with a family, we're going on a ride. There's different people. But especially when we're bayn al-Muslimin, the question is, what kind of examples are we setting? Because it's very easy to tell children, lakum dinakum waliyad-din. To quote this ayah, right? Tell them, they have their religion, we have our religion, we respect them, they have their views, we have ours. We don't hate anyone, we don't disrespect anyone, we don't put other people down. They have their culture, we have ours. But when you're dealing with other Muslims or other Shia, now it gets complicated. Because kids start asking, but they're Shia too. I see them in the masjid, but then they're having, let's say, a special, Taylor Swift party or something for their kid. And people do that all the time. Muslim, Shia. How do you justify that to your kid? Now you're in difficult territory. These are having kids, again, how do you habituate? These are like major moments. Right? Marriage, again, another very critical time in life. Forget about how one will live their marriage. That's a different thing. How are they going to conduct the ceremony? What will it look like? Will it be according to ahkam shar'iyya, according to the laws of Islam? Or is it going to be according to one's desires? Is it going to be a totally mixed gathering with ghayrul maharim, not in full hijab, not in proper hijab mixing, which we know is obviously not jaiz? Or is it going to be separate? Is there going to be music or is there not going to be music? I mean, these are the questions, right? So how people commemorate these vital events in their life are what I call telltale signs for their spiritual health. The checkups. These are like fundamental, vital signs of Iman. And then retirement. How does someone spend their retirement? Is it just simply in gossip and ghiba, na'udhu billah, and this and that? Or is it to take more time in their deen, volunteer in their community, so on and so forth? Again, nothing wrong in traveling and stuff. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that how do people spend their free time? That's a question. And of course, Hajj and Ziyarah is the best of occupations. That is a given, obviously, too. But even Hajj and Ziyarah, how does someone remember their Ziyarah? I remember I once asked somebody, an uncle once came back from Ziyarah from Iraq, and I asked him, I said, Uncle, how, mashallah, you came from Karbala. He said, yeah, the food was no good. And I'm thinking, subhanallah, Habibi, that's the first thing you tell me? You can go to some restaurant here. There's so many good ones. It's fine. 1 week, 2 weeks. And the first thing that came out of his mouth, first thing, not alhamdulillah, we had the honor to visit Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, Amir al-Mu'mineen, Imam al-Kadhim, so on and so forth. No. It was, the food, I tell you, the groups, the food they provided. I'm just thinking, I'm like, how do I get through to you? Like, you're like 70 years old now, like you've had 69 years of your life to figure this out. And you attend the mosque, you attend all these events, but still, it's not habituated. The habituation is not there. You're not it's not ingrained. And that's scary, because that's, again, an example of a vital sign. So a rich family, a wealthy family, is one that can put an iman tick mark for all of these events. It's not hard. You don't have to be Sheikh Bahjat and be in state of irfan. But this is true irfan. Here. Everything else is talk. Because these are hard. Sometimes this requires not inviting, maybe rub a couple of people the wrong way, not intentionally, of course, but, لا طاعة الخلق في معصية الخالق, right? There's no obedience to creation in the disobedience of the Creator. So, these are things that are very important. And what Taylor mentions is that in the modern age, if one is not connected to a religious community or a religious way of life on a regular basis, with learning, not just coming, but with learning, then they're going to have these marital problems, trust me. Oh yeah, it's going to be big problems. Big problems. Because there's the heart is not right. It's not settled. And maybe they brought up their whole life in a certain way, being taught the religion through force or whatever. That's a different thing as to why they ended up in this place at 40 or 35 or 50 or 60 or 70 and they just don't care. Or maybe they're just being religious because they don't want to look bad in front of other people. Right? Just a safe face for the community. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala obviously, protect us and save us from that. I hope this didn't rattle too many people's cages, huh? I hope I don't get banned from here. I'm on the X list now, Taliban, Shia, huh? Extremist Shia. But just go to Minhaj of Marja, it's there. I mean, nothing I'm saying is not in Minhaj, the Risala Amaliyah, but people often don't look at the Risala Amaliyah to see what's haram and what's halal, But this is something that at least it's important to me. It's important to me, and I'll just finish off why very briefly here, and you can kind of think about it in this way. It's really simple. Is it God then everything else, or is it the human, the universe, then God? What is the order of our thinking? That will tell us how we live. Are we thinking in reverse, or are we thinking forward? Which is God and then everything else, humans in the universe, or humans in the universe then God. So it all depends on what comes first in the... And the thing is that no matter what I come and tell you, I can't implant that in you. It's not possible. It's just not possible. It's something that is a combination of your effort and, most importantly, the grace and the tawfiq of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's all it is. And that doesn't mean we won't have challenges, and it doesn't mean that we won't disobey. We will, certainly. We are humans, we are fallible, we are sinful. But at least if our head is screwed on right, put on right on our body, then we at least know what direction to turn. If we don't know what direction to turn in, and then we get into a family, oof, big trouble. And hence the 50% divorce rate, and up and up and up and up. I'll just conclude on this note. Salah time is what, in like a couple of minutes, I assume, right? What's the Salah time today? 8:35?
I think it's in 10 minutes.
Okay, we still have some time. I recently had the opportunity to meet Ayatollah al-Uzma Sheikh Muhammad al-Sanad al-Bahraini in Najaf, al-Ashraf, one of the Maraja in Najaf, the teachers of Bahth al-Kharij. He told me something really amazing, really, really mind-blowingly amazing. I mentioned this issue about family life in the West and the difficulties and stuff, and he's lived in the UK for a few years during his A-levels and stuff. This was in the 80s, but still there's very few Maraja that I've ever known that have ever left like Iraq or Iran or Lebanon, like outside of like those three countries basically almost, right? Except for maybe for medical treatment for a few days or something. Like they have not actually lived in this part of the world. But he has, Sheikh Sanad has. And I mentioned this to him, and he told me something interesting. He says, because people don't know how to live with each other. Difficulties come when we don't know how to live with each other. And then he showed me in Wasa'il al-Shi'a, in one of the very important books of hadith in Islamic law and in hadith, there's a whole section on living together. Babul Ashra, something like that. I remember the exact word of the Bab. He opened it and he showed me. He's like, there's a whole section with like 400 ahadith about how to live with one another. And every single one is from the Prophet or the Ahlul Bayt. Connected, obviously, ultimately to God. Because they've given us a way of living together. They've given us a complete package, a complete way of life, a complete way of finding meaning in this world. In every relationship. Parenting, children, teenage years, you name it. In every part of our life and our relationship, Allah and the Prophet and the Ahlul Bayt, Allah obviously through the Quran, the revelation, and the Prophet and the Imams through their sayings, have given us that. And that's in the second category, right? The human reverse, rather the first one, God and then everything else. But then what happens when we have problems, I notice that it's the second one, it's the thinking in reverse that's the problem. Because they're trying to fit that in to a software or a system or a habitat that is not conditioned for it. And thus there's a problem in accepting it, in qabiliyah. And this is not easy. This process of conditioning is not easy. It takes years, it takes time. And it ultimately has to come because you believe in God. If you don't, or you are on that road, then may Allah guide me and guide you. Again, it's not about guilt, but it's simply understanding the foundational problem. And then that's how we define what a rich family is. Right? And obviously, living in this modern age is not easy, but in some senses, it is very possible when we are connected to community, connected to one another, and connected to groups of people who reflect those values. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين.
So I actually have a quick question.
Sure.
So you talked about, how a few families, like, despite, attending, like, the center often, or, being involved, or, X, Y, Z, they still kind of lack that deep sense of faith, right? Or, like, this idea that God is, like, everything, and then everything goes after that, right? It's like God and then everything else, right? So what do you think are kind of like the root causes of that, and how can, we kind of go about fixing that?
I think that every Muslim is required to understand the deen for themselves. It is a combination of things. I think it could be sin. I think that coming to the center does not obfuscate people or does not somehow purify people of sin. So let's say, for example, somebody for years has been, in a sinful environment, so on and so forth. They come to the mosque because that's just what their family does. But there isn't a change in their home environment. There isn't a change in their behavior. There isn't a change in those other parts of their life. But they come maybe because it's something that they've done for generations. But it's not something that they're like, okay, I'm coming here to change myself. Right? So you know what I mean? It's more of a habit. Right? So I don't know if you remember years ago when I was at one of our brothers' houses. Remember, I was talking about I visited a country. I know this is recorded, so I have to be very, or maybe don't post